The lands through which the Juba and Shabelle rivers flow, often described as the breadbasket that once nourished Somalia. For many years, Somali farmlands produced not only food for domestic consumption but also major export crops, especially during the Italian colonization period and later during the Somali military government. Reports indicate that before the collapse of the central government in 1990, more than 450,000 hectares of land along these rivers were cultivated, producing large quantities of export crops such as sugarcane, rice, and bananas. Crops intended for local markets included maize, sesame, and vegetables. The Juba and Shabelle rivers are essential to Somalia's agriculture and food production, and they are the only two perennial rivers in the country, with more than 95% of their water originating from Ethiopia. Somalis rely on these rivers for irrigation, both large and small farms, and the fertile lands along them produce rice, maize, vegetables, and various other food crops. These rivers have also expanded economic opportunities and created employment for farmers, irrigation workers, and other agricultural laborers who depended on farming for income and survival. River-based agriculture is the backbone of the rural economy for farming communities and for pastoralist populations living near the river valleys. Given how critical these two rivers are for Somalia, the question becomes, what would happen if Ethiopia were to restrict or block the flow of these rivers? First, irrigation water would sharply decrease. Farmers whose livelihoods depend on river water would face severe shortages, especially during drought seasons. Reduced water flow would diminish crop yields, cause the loss of entire crop varieties, and drastically shrink national food production. Such a situation could result in widespread food inflation and shortages. Communities near the rivers would also face drought and water scarcity, as wells, ponds, and irrigation systems would be severely affected. Loss of agricultural income could increase poverty and further fuel migration, especially among young farmers who might abandon their homes in search of livelihood elsewhere, adding to the already rising number of migrants and placing additional economic pressure on Somali communities. Soil fertility would also decline over time, because reduced flooding would weaken the natural replenishment of nutrients in floodplain soil, damaging crop growth and long-term productivity. On the Ethiopian side, restricting water could benefit them through increased hydropower production, enabling the construction of more dams and improved water storage systems, providing cheap electricity and greater water security during drought periods. To help you understand the gravity of this situation, consider four hydrological stages of the Juba and Shabelle. In the late 1990s, before the civil war deepened, river flow was stable and continuous, and all existing dams, 8 major structures and several smaller ones, operated effectively. They irrigated about 45,000 hectares along the Juba and 60,000 hectares along the Shabelle. At that time, river valley populations numbered approximately 0.9 million for the Juba and 1.6 million for the Shabelle. Ethiopia's water usage then was minimal and had no noticeable impact. Today, in 2025, after years of urban expansion and population growth, the Shabelle River especially has weakened severely, with inconsistent flow and unreliable seasonal patterns. Its irrigation infrastructure has nearly collapsed, and most dams no longer function. Irrigated farmland has shrunk to roughly 15,000 hectares on the Shabelle and about 50,000 on the Juba, possibly even less on the Shabelle. River valley populations have risen to between 2.1 million and 3.5 million people. Ethiopia's water usage has sharply increased, especially after the construction of major dams near the Somali-inhabited town of Godi. Following Ethiopia's recent large-scale water projects, Juba river flows have decreased by about 20% and the Shabelle by nearly 80%. As a result, the Shabelle can now irrigate only about 32,000 hectares, a 57% reduction compared to the year 2000. Ethiopia stands to gain more benefits from further restricting river flow, particularly by expanding its political leverage or economic influence, as control over these transboundary rivers could become a strategic tool in regional diplomacy, especially during times of strained relations. However, if Ethiopia takes such a dangerous and hostile step, the consequences could be severe: regional diplomatic tension, damaged relations, possible sanctions, and renewed disputes related to long-standing territorial issues between the two countries. To prevent such a future, Somalia must push for legally binding technical agreements with Ethiopia, under international monitoring, based on scientific water flow data and shared water management. Somalia also needs to accelerate the construction of its own water storage and irrigation infrastructure. If international media or Ethiopian outlets raise this issue, Somalia must respond with emergency planning and long-term protection strategies to safeguard its population from the devastating impacts such actions could cause.